All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Chess. Today is the recap day, and we'll go through all the positions that I've studied throughout the week. So let's start with this one. Uh, so here the key idea I recall is G3, losing a tempo at the appropriate moment. Also, second idea is not to let this pawn give you sacrifice itself so that the G pawn will be on H file and Black King is able to stop us by reaching F7. So yeah, this idea of trapping the opponent's king on these squares, I'll be watching out for going ahead. All right, so let's start. So here we need to get a position. The position continues, and after king goes back to a3 to try to approach either the black pawn or the white pawn. Now we lose the tempo, get the correspondence, and continue walking up the board. Now here this gets captured, and after this you can shuffle around, and white king will be able to get the position and uh, move a particular square, so h7 or f7, and will be able to queen the pawn. Uh, Here again, shuffling back does not work, so uh, here we can go again g4, and now we can still capture the pawn on h6, and this pawn gets promoted because it's on g file. What happens if you go g4? Then this march continues, but now this king is able to reach f7, right? So h5 happens, captures. If you don't capture, if you try to push, then this, and if white king tries to stop, sorry, yeah, you need to be in front of the king. Now white king will never be able to get a position and get in front of this pawn. So yeah, that's all she wrote. And capture is forced, but if you capture, then still either king will try to get to f7 or sorry, h7, h8 squares, and if you manage to stop that, black king will be able to get this particular setup. Yeah, so I think that covers it up. Basically, you need to remember g3, the idea with sacrifice of the h1, and two main themes are there. Either this king will try to capture the white pawn, or will try to come up and protect the pawn on h6, which is quite difficult. Yeah, that's all. Okay, dokie. So, this was the second position we looked at, and basic concept was king activity. How black king marches up the board when there's no issue or threat of pawns getting captured. White king is not going to go up the board, capture these pawns, while the black king is on his own crazy run up the board. What happened in the actual game was this exchange, and then king came all the way up to the board, making sure this pawn is locked up, and white king is completely passive defending the pawns. Of course, this side of board, black can start with something like b5, or rather than that, there's another idea that we need to look at first. But yeah, basically this side can be frozen up with b5 and a6, but on this side of the board, white still has equal pawns, and the only possibility is to make progress on this side of the board for white. So black can look at different variations and try to freeze up these three pawns as well. So this king is passive, and both side of board cannot make progress. The queen side and the king side, and yeah, black is able to win the game that way. The key idea here, after reaching this position, is to stop the march of the f4 pawn. If f4 happens, then There are different variations, but this position is completely winning for black in any case. Let's start with what? So b5. This pawn cannot come up now. White king can either shuffle or go f4. Even if he goes f4, then the idea is we need to take apart this pawn first. So maybe h6 or f6 and then g5. This again, white king is paralyzed. He can try, but then this is simply losing a pawn. So white will never be able to move the e3 pawn. King h1, g5. Captures is simply better for white because once the all these pawns are exchanged, this pawn will go up the board, and yeah, that will be end of it. Let's take a look at a variation. So let's say f3, then f5, and this simply losing because now these pawns are also frozen, and after this g3, now captures is the only way. I cannot just still shuffle, like this is completely losing. He'll have to go up, and yeah. But if white captures, then this pawn is going to fall, and now this is completely winning. Anyone can calculate from here. So I think this was it. But the one key move we need to consider is in this position, f5 is completely bad because now f4 can happen, and now this does not have same impact because now h6 and g5, if you think you can go, then say for g5 and f3. Now you cannot push the pawn. Also, if you capture, then these two pawns are completely frozen up. This pawn is not going to queen because we are always going to protect, and all these squares are out of reach for black king. So black will have, so the activity won't matter. The king's active position won't matter because he cannot approach these pawns and capture. Okay, that's why this is the only way. But once king moves back, you can go h3 or even h4, and he is not going to break through the, like, there's no pawn here. Even this won't work because these two pawns will completely hold back the black king. So this is the only move black can make to lose the game. But yeah, the simple idea is we need to stop this pawns push. So even e5 works. Now this is run like this. You can go capture, and then 2 versus 3 majority will be winning. Like the third position was this, and the concept we were looking at was pendulum. By pendulum, because both kings will go back and forth. Here, it's white to move, and white will, of course, try to approach the pawn first to capture it, and black king always needs to make sure that white king is not able to enter in one of the three key squares. What happens if he lets him? Of course, if in this position this cannot be pushed, captures. Here, white will have to go again back, and if this, then king even will happen, and again, you won't be able to make progress, right? King even, and this pawn is now going to queen again. So this scenario, basically black is not going to win. He just need to make sure that this pawn never reaches A. There is one way to lose for white, and that is instead of pushing the like making sure that shuffle keeps on going, pushing the pawn. Now this loses simply because of e4. Okay, the first thing anyone will notice is the 5 squares white pawn needs to come up, and only 4 square which black pawn. So he's going to queen first, and you can argue that okay, it will be a simultaneous queening once pawn queens will be pushing up, but that's not a scenario where king is close to the pawn. Also, this pawn on e3 will be giving a check, so white needs to waste a move to move the king, and this pawn basically queens two tempis up. So the only option for white is to make sure that he keeps on shuffling and won't let this pawn move up the board. That's the whole idea here. And is this one. Here we looked at the concept of shouldering. Shouldering basically means we keep your opponent's king out of a particular position. So why we need to keep this king out? We already know the trick where once the king is on a7 or 8, black king or opponent's king will try to go to c7 and basically block opponent's king on the corner of the board. That's what black can do because of course this king will reach the pawns first and capture it while supporting the white pawn. So white king needs to make sure that when he captures the a7 pawn, black king is not able to reach the c7 square. So any of these squares, okay, any of these three squares, c6, d6 or d7, these three squares black king won't be when he captures the a7 pawn. That happens if you are able to get a position. Yeah. Now he is not on c6, c7, and even if it tries, we can escape. Is there any other route? Let's see if he goes this way. So he may try to go here and loop around, right? Now it's so you need to approach the pawn. Yeah. Now it again does not work because these three square, the king is not there, right? Now he reaches, but it's too late. So shouldering, basically you're instead of marching straight forward with a raw instinct of getting to this pawn, you need to uh, diagonally approach this pawn. Basically, if you remember this trick where king can get trapped on the edges of the board, then you're, I think, golden. Mm, yeah, let's see, move on to next. We understood the concept of breakthrough. Basic idea being uh, we push b6. Breakthrough doesn't apply to just this position. Breakthrough basically means you sacrifice a pawn to create a passer. Now here, whatever opponents captures by, we push the diagonally opposite pawn. If this captures, then this is going to queen, and if this captures, then this is going to queen. That's the whole concept of breakthrough. Black king cannot leave the h6 pawn alone, but he on the other side of board he can create a passer. Now here white king is also stuck on this king side of the board. He can move, get out of the way and push the pawn, maybe create a passed pawn, but this majority will also be able to create a passed pawn much more quickly. So the key idea here was c4. uh, Previously, we also saw that this blockade is important on the double pawns side. So, what happens if you go c4? Basically, these pawns are stuck. You cannot move up the board. If this pawn ever comes up, then take captures, 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 and yeah, this pawn cannot move up. And if it goes, you capture and create a pass pawn. So what happens if g6, then of course you can go easier way would be c5. The white king is stuck, captures, 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 and you'll have a queen.